This video is brought to you by Alienware, featuring Intel Core i7 processors. Start gaming.
Hey guys, MVC here for the Team Dignitas YouTube page for another video review. Today is going to be the Alienware Alpha, essentially Alienware's take on the console replacement, designed to be placed in front of your television in the lounge while you're slouched on your couch. Essentially comes bundled with Windows 8.1 and includes an Xbox 360 controller, and then through Alienware software, an additional UI on top of Windows. When you launch it, you can either jump into Windows as you normally would, utilizing any application you want through Word, Publisher, Excel, Microsoft Office applications, to games on Steam, Origin, League of Legends, whatever, or you can run it through the gaming mode utilizing Steam's Big Picture, which is the main focus of it. It's almost like not needing Steam OS, because you can play anything on this, whereas Steam OS would limit you just to Steam, but it does have the big picture mode, so you get that feeling. Eventually, if the Steam OS controller is compatible, you will be able to use it with this. So yeah, we're going to jump in, have a look at the specs, have a look at how it performs in games, both PC exclusive, single player and multiplayer alike, before coming back right at the end with my final thoughts, feelings and conclusions as to whether it's worth your time and money. So enjoy the video and we'll catch you at the end. So our Alienware Alpha is the leftmost option during the Alienware checkout process. In other words, the cheapest one. It features an Intel i3 4130T processor clocked at 2.9 GHz. We got 4 GB of GDDR3 memory in the motherboard, of which is upgradable, as there are 2 DIMM slots, so you can upgrade that to 8 or 16 down the line in dual channel. We've got a 2 GB GeForce GTX 860M graphics chip in there, and our hard drive is a 500 GB 5400 RPM SATA 6 GB per second drive. Again, a little bit disappointed this isn't an SSD, but you could upgrade that yourself manually later on, of which there is a video in the description if you want to find out how. Now on the front of the unit, we've got 2 USB 2.0 ports, our power button in the shape of the Alienware head, and of course our LEDs. And then on the rear we find our 2 USB 3.0 ports, our RJ45 Ethernet connection port for wired internet. Inside, of course, there is also a wireless card if you'd prefer to use that, supporting 2.4 and 5 GHz. We've got our HDMI out 1.4A port supporting 4K resolution, and our HDMI in port if you want to connect an external device to watch through the Alpha. And finally, we have an optical out port for audio and our DC in for power, of which it is an external power supply to save space. As for what you get in the box, you get your unit, HDMI cable, power cable including external power supply, and then an Xbox 360 pad wireless receiver and 2 included AA batteries. But with that all said and done, let's go and have a look at the Alienware Alpha UI that they've shipped with the unit to see how they've managed to make this console replacement viable for use in both Windows and gaming environments. So again, one thing to point out before we get in is you can't boot up the console using the pad. You will have to press the Alienware head on the front of the Alpha to boot up. Not a big issue, but it's something to bear in mind that it does require you get up to push the button. But all of this is recorded in real time, so the boot times are what you're likely to expect if you pick up an Alpha yourself. And as such, I do recommend if you've used an SSD before or you'd like quick boot up times, you consider installing your own one afterwards, because it does make a huge difference. But if you've never used an SSD, boot times are what you'd normally expect from a standard mechanical hard drive. But one of the big limiting factors here with the Alpha UI is that it's designed with Steam Big Picture in mind. So whilst it's a great implementation, it does require, if you play other games such as Origin or League of Legends, you do enter into the standard Windows desktop mode to play them. But that's also a great thing, because that's the beauty of the Alienware Alpha, is they get the option of both. Whereas if you went straight to the Steam OS, you'd only be able to play Steam games and you wouldn't have the option of the desktop mode and usual applications like Microsoft Office and Excel or whatever else it happens to be, Photoshop maybe. But anyway, we're going to leave this booting up, and when we get in, we'll run through the Alpha UI. So as you can see, straight into the Alpha UI, not the Windows option for now, we can launch into Steam Big Picture. We've got settings, we've got help, and our power options. So starting off with settings, in here we've got our video display options, including resolution and refresh rate, 60 Hz, compatible with 1080p televisions, and will go higher than that at lower resolutions, and also scale to fit the screen. Next one along, we've got audio. Here we've got audio output, including optical and HDMI, as well as a volume slider if you don't want to use your television. Next along, we've got our customization, including the color of our Alienware head and the triangle to the left, as you can see there, changing, as well as a brightness level. Next one down, we've got network, including 2.4 and 5 GHz connections. The 5 GHz one is going to cover you for things like Steam streaming and pretty much cause you no lag whatsoever, which is great. And finally at the bottom, we've got a HDMI in if you want to connect to a third-party console or some other source to watch through the alpha, to save you having to change sources on your television. Next one along here, we've got help. Under here, we've got all the different hotkeys, including system menu, shifting focus, full screen, control mouse, and close application. So for example, if I press them all together and press the analog stick in, we get control of the mouse cursor, something we'll get into shortly if I quickly turn that off. And finally, we've got power, which allows us to set the console to sleep, to restart, to shut down, or to go to the desktop, something we'll get into in a minute. But first, starting off, we're going to launch into Steam Big Picture, something I won't really go into, because if you're familiar with Steam Picture, or if you want to know more, there's plenty of videos already on YouTube to check out. But generally speaking, this is going to allow us to boot into as many different Steam accounts as possible, with or without the entry of a password, depending on who's actually going to be playing on the unit. But as you can see here are our different accounts. At the top, we've also got settings. And again, you can check all this out in another video on YouTube if you're interested. But again, that only allows you to play Steam games. If you want to play anything else, you have to hit power and then go to desktop. But the great thing about this is that it does require, by default, that you enter a password to get in. So if we get access of the mouse, we click this. And for the purpose of just making life easier, I'm simply going to type on the keyboard for the password part. As you can see now, we are on the desktop, and again, we have got control of the mouse. And some of the other cool things you can do is if we were to open Steam, for example, and maybe open a folder, and perhaps with that open Internet Explorer, again, it just takes a little while because we are running on a mechanical drive. But what you can do is press all the triggers together, left and right, and it's going to allow us to change tabs, as well as full screen and minimize things as well. So if we open that up, we can also close it and do a whole host of other things through the pad, which is neat. So yeah, overall, very much a fan of it. And again, by coming into the desktop, you can use your usual applications or play whatever game you like. So yeah. Anyway, let's jump into some actual gameplay and benchmarks. So moving into gameplay testing with the Alienware Alpha on the i3 4130T and GTX 860M, the methodology was pretty straightforward. We're simply running fraps to record the minimum, maximum and average FPS values of various segments of games, and then utilising NVIDIA's GeForce Experience and the NVIDIA encoder through Shadowplay to record the gameplay at up to 50 megabytes per second via the Alpha stored directly into the hard drive with little to no performance hit. Maybe 1 to 2 FPS at maximum if you want to take it into an account. But we're aiming for 60 FPS minimum, being a PC, and with that said, 1080p as well to coincide with televisions on the market today. And we're able to push up quite a few of those settings in our first title, Tomb Raider, running FXAA. We scored a minimum of 50, a maximum of 78, and an average of 63.208. And then dropping everything down to low to try and hit that minimum of 60 at all times for those that want it. Scored a minimum of 95, a maximum of 144, and an average of 121.938. For our second game, it's going to be Metro Last Light Redux, and this is a little bit of a longer segment compared to Tomb Raider, so if you want to skip ahead, please click the button to do so. But regardless, we were able to push up a few of those things. Quality at medium has scored a minimum of 45, a maximum of 80, and an average of 62.864. I didn't notice the FPS dip down lower than 60 all that often. That average value seems quite realistic in my opinion. And with the SSAA disabled, that's something I still do on the high-end graphics cards as well, as I don't really see a benefit at 1080p. But if you want to dip down lower just to give you that safe peace of mind, you'll get a minimum of 56, a maximum of 106, and an average of 80.068. However, if you get the chance, rather than play on an alpha, play this completely maxed out on a high-end gaming system like the Aurora or the Area 51 for maximum immersion. But being a single-player campaign and it's not super competitive, you won't be the end of the world if you do dip down below 60. But yeah, if you want to skip ahead, please click the button.
Looks like we pretty much cleaned the place. How are you? Okay? Go left. Hey, you alright? Hey, Artyom. You're doing a decent job. Maybe you're more than a rabbit after all. I think I see it. About 30 meters from your position. 2 o'clock. What's keeping you? Come on! Damn, fast. How did it do that? Circle it. Wait. It should be here. Watching you. See it. You're going down, you little fucker. Please after it, Artyom. There's no way around. Left. Right. It's right above you. Watch out. Down. This one.
So for our third game, we're jumping out of the Steam box mode in the Alienware UI and into Origin via the Windows 8.1 desktop. We had to run everything on low to get Crysis 3 single player here to respectable frames per second, and we scored a minimum of 32, a maximum of 87 and an average of 56.926. If you're questioning why we're running 2TX SMAA for the anti-aliasing, that's quite simply because 1TX and 2TX don't seem to affect FPS whatsoever. It's only when you go higher than that that it really has a detrimental impact. But with that said, you could probably play through the single player campaign at low on the Alienware Alpha, but for me it just highlights where the Alienware Alpha is limiting you moving forward, because if you were to pay a little bit extra into the other small form factor gaming PC, the X51, you have an option to upgrade your graphics card, and that's something that Crysis definitely benefits from, is raw graphics power. So if you could upgrade your graphics card for not only Crysis 3 but other graphically intensive games moving forward, you'd be able to bring up that FPS on a periodic basis. But with this in mind, Crysis 3 and maybe other GPU intensive games could struggle on the Alienware Alpha, even at low settings. It really comes down to what you're prepared to play at. But again, if you want to skip ahead, click the button. Otherwise, keep watching if you'd like to repeat the benchmark process and find out where we stop yourself.
Psycho, this train is full of highly explosive material.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
This is your plan?
Yeah.
Come on, you bastards!
For our fourth game, we're moving back to the Steam big box, but still on the Crysis Crytek engine. It's Evolve, very, very demanding, made by developer Turtle Rock Studios, original creators of Left 4 Dead. We scored a minimum of 22, a maximum of 40, and an average of 32.029. Again, bearing in mind that 1TX SMAA doesn't really have any effect on FPS. And if you want to recreate the same test yourself, simply create a custom solo game here on Fusion Plant, play as the Goliath, and run this route, hitting the big fat lizard things when I hit them with my 3 combos. I can't remember the name, it's been a few weeks, but regardless, run this route and you can recreate it. But not too impressive results. I don't really have too much to add to it. A little bit disappointed here, but again, just highlights the fact that the GPU is non-upgradable, so you're really buying for today and not for tomorrow. But we're going to be jumping into some more CPU intensive games and less GPU intensive, so we can start to see the Alienware Alpha shine a little bit more again. So for our fifth game, given the Alienware Alpha is designed around the Steam Big Box feature, I figured we should include some Valve games. It's more CPU intensive, and with that said, better frame rates across the board. Left 4 Dead 2, we're running 4 times MSAA with everything maxed out, and again you could dip down quite a few of these settings if you like to gain more frames per second, but scored a minimum of 79, a maximum of 172, and an average of 108.491. Again, if you were to jump up to the i5 version, you're probably going to increase those frames per second further, because again this is CPU intensive, or you could manually update your CPU later down the line, bearing in mind the power supply that comes bundled with the Alienware Alpha and what it actually supports. But yeah, very impressed with the performance here given the size of the system. Again, would be interested to see what the i5 is, but nonetheless, if you want to keep watching, please feel free. Otherwise, skip ahead.
We got through this garage sale.
Be coming back through here.
So for our sixth game, sticking with the Valve theme, it's Counter-Strike Global Offensive, one of the biggest FPS games on the PC right now. It is huge in terms of esports, so much prize money, and we're running pretty much everything maxed out here. We've got 4 times MSAA as well, and scored a minimum of 94, a maximum of 145, and an average of 117.528. Very much impressed here with the i3 performance. To be honest, I really thought you'd need an i5 for CSGO, but it turns out a good i3 does the job just fine, especially when you consider we can still drop down some of those settings. So yeah, extremely impressed and surprised here by the Alpha performance. So for our final game, it really had to be League of Legends, one of the biggest esport games, if not the biggest, on the PC platform right now across the world. You definitely need a mouse and keyboard for this, but maybe my mind will change when the SteamOS controller drops and you give that a go here with the Alienware Alpha. Maybe that's possible. But regardless, right here we've got absolutely everything maxed out, 1080p with AA enabled in the menus. Dignitas Lumpy's playing mid lane, Lulu, but kind of boring up there, so we're watching Ashe and Leona here at bot, about to get into a team fight. And during this entire segment, scored a minimum with these settings of 63, a maximum of 81, and an average of 68.633. And again, I have to stress throughout all these benchmarks, we're aiming toward 1080p 60Hz televisions, and with this said, you're going to have a great time on the Alienware Alpha playing League of Legends. But I'll leave it with you. If you want to skip to the next segment, my final thoughts, please go ahead. But yeah, keep watching if not. So final thoughts then for the Alienware Alpha. Well, it's actually very difficult for me to give a non-biased opinion on it because day to day I use something more akin to the Alienware Aurora or the Area 51, a high-end gaming computer with an overclocked i7, an overclocked high-end NVIDIA graphics card and an SSD. So my boot times to Windows are quick, my load times in games are fast, and on top of that my FPS is through the roof with everything maxed out at 1080p. But the Alienware Alpha is not necessarily geared to someone like me. It's got an i3 and an entry-level NVIDIA graphics card designed to be your first foray into the PC market to replace the console. However, my problem lies in that is that if you're going to make the transition from a console to a PC, I think you should do it properly. And if you're not going to do it properly, this is very limiting. You can't update the graphics card. You're limited to what's in here, meaning the games that are out today are the games you're likely to be playing on this only. Things 2 years down the line, this is going to be incompatible, and it's almost like you're committing to an upgrade cycle with the Alpha. Now, one thing I would recommend if you do get it is to install your own SSD. There's a video available on the Alienware YouTube page as to how to do that, but the boot times are very slow, and dropping down from an SSD on my primary PC to this, immediately noticeable. It just makes your whole life using a PC, this Alienware Alpha, so much better, I imagine, if it had an SSD. But because Alienware also have an X51, which is kind of like the next step up, where you can upgrade the graphics card and also you can put a few more beefier products in during the checkout process, and it's not a whole lot more expensive. If you want a small form factor computer for in front of the television and you don't mind missing out on Alienware's UI, which at the end of the day is a piece of software in effect that they could offer for the X51, then I would certainly suggest going for the X51. You're getting more for your money, not only today but in the long run. But if you're someone that doesn't care about maxing out all your games, you just want to enjoy a good story and experience some of the PC exclusives, this will do it. It just takes a little bit longer to get into game, and you might have to dip down some of the settings a little bit more. And you saw the benchmarks, we won't go into that. If that's something you're interested in, Alienware Alpha, yeah, sure, go for it. But for me, if I was buying small form factor, I'd go for the X51 unless I absolutely wanted the Alienware UI, which is really good, by the way, and I definitely commend them for including it. And to be honest, the UI that they offer is almost better than the eventual Steam OS because you get to play games that are not included in Steam, like League of Legends. So this has its uses, it's just not for me. And if I was going to use it, it'd be more something that I'd stream via Steam my games from my primary computer to this, so I can max everything out, or to emulate games in the lounge, or maybe as a media center. As a primary gaming PC, it's just too different to my main system. And honestly, if you've got the money, do it properly. Go X51, go Aurora, go Area 51, or if you're really competent, you could look to build your own. But again, your prerogative. I've been MVC here for the Scampro Gaming tab. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.